All right, we're gonna finish this last lesson off before your test. Your test is on Monday, this coming Monday. And it's covering 5, 5, 5, 6, 5, 7. And you will have proofs on your test. You did not have them on your quiz, but you will have it on your test.
There's gonna be on the test?
Well, you should know how to name angles already. So it's not going to specifically ask you these questions, but you should know how to name them. All right, looking at the first one, they want you to name 3 names for the angles. So who could give me all 3 for number 1? Kyle? Go ahead.
A, B, C.
Angle A, B, C. What's another one?
A.
Angle A, no.
Angle B.
Angle B, because it's specifically the angle. And what's another name?
Angle CBA.
Good. Angle CBA. I'm just reversing it. Keep in mind, looking at all of this, B is in the middle. And B is the angle that I'm specifically talking about. All right, number 2. This one you could really give 4 names. Who could give me 1?
JKL.
Angle JKL. What's another one? Yeah. Angle 2. What was that? Bruce, what'd you say? LKJ. And what's one more? Angle K. Okay, so we named 4 for that one. All right, number 3. Who could give me the names? Anybody else? Name the angle. How do I name this angle? Nobody knows how to name the angle?
HMN.
Angle HMN. What's another one? Angle M. And what's the last one? NMH. Just reversing it. Excuse me. And number 4. Angle P. Angle MPR. Angle RPM. All right, questions on how to name angles? No? Okay. All right, we are doing 5-7 using congruent triangles. So this lesson, it's just proofs. So you guys know how to answer proofs on your tests come Monday. Keep in mind, they're not going to be fill in the blank. They will be multiple choice. So you will be able to choose which statements and reasons go together. But you still need to know it. There's concepts in here that we're going to learn that are new that we haven't covered before. All right, how to prove 2 segments or angles are congruent. You need to prove it. You need to prove 2 triangles are congruent. State that 2 parts are congruent using reason. Corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. This is the acronym. And this is the shortened version of that entire thing, which you will see multiple times. This stands for corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent, meaning we should know what corresponding means. So the corresponding parts of a congruent triangle, and we should know what the word congruent means. So it's super important that you know that. So giving an example, I'm going to draw, I suggest you guys draw it as well, 2 triangles. Let me get... Here's one triangle, and I'm going to label it A, B, C. Remember, 2 triangles have to be congruent. Here's another triangle. All right, so looking at this triangle, we know that triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF. Okay, I labeled my triangle, I drew all of my parts, and they are congruent Because of which theorem?
Side angle side. I mean angle side angle.
Good. Angle, side, angle. So when are we using CPCTC? Corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. When would we be using that? So you are able to show, you can now show angle B is congruent to angle E. Okay, so we should already know that if they're giving me two congruent angles, I am able to tell you that the third is congruent. Okay, so looking at this, third angle, or CPCTC, I can tell that all my corresponding parts are congruent. Okay, we learned one in the previous lessons where if they're giving you two angles that are congruent, you should automatically know that the third will also be congruent. So that's something that we should be able to know. Another thing we should be able to tell is that side BC is congruent to which side? BC is congruent to which side? Who can tell me?
EC, EF.
Good, EF. And then we should be able to tell AB is congruent to, good, DE. Okay, so basically I labeled all of my angles with the first one, and I'm labeling all of my sides with the second one. And this is still telling me corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Okay, so I'm basically able to label everything. I'm able to show you that all my angles are congruent, and I'm able to show you that all of my sides are congruent. Okay, that's basically what it means, that everything that is given is going to be congruent. Okay, so all of my corresponding parts, corresponding parts of my congruent triangles, because they are congruent, are going to be congruent. So corresponding parts, looking at it, I have this side with this side that's corresponding, this side with this side that's corresponding, and these sides are corresponding. And then I also am able to tell by looking at this, my angles. This angle is corresponding with this one. This angle is corresponding with this one. And because those are giving me my congruency marks, I'm able to tell that B is congruent to angle E. So all of my corresponding parts are congruent. Okay. All right, looking at example 1, it says given. So they're giving me this information, and because they're giving it to you, do you see any marks on your diagram? I don't see any congruency marks or anything marked on my diagram. So when they're giving you something, it is in your best interest to actually draw it. So it may not look like it's obviously not drawn, but please, you guys have to mark on your test. You have to mark on your diagram, and you have to show me what's congruent. It's going to help you move on to the next step in your proof. If you're not doing that, you're going to have a difficult time. So definitely, if they're giving you information and it's not drawn on your diagram, go ahead and draw it. So it says, given PR bisects angle QPS, and PQ is congruent to PS, they want us to prove that angle Q is congruent to angle S. So we're going to first draw what they gave us. So how would I represent that PR bisects QPS? So we should be able to know, here's PR, QPS. When something's bisecting, what does that mean? It's cutting in half equally. So they gave me the angle, and they're giving me where it's bisecting. So that means this angle is going to be congruent to this angle. I'm just drawing it to represent what they gave me. And then they also said PQ is congruent to PS. So here's PQ, here's PS. It may not look like they're the same measure, but because they're giving me that information, I know it's the same measure. So don't look at it and say, oh, but they don't look like they're congruent. If they gave it to you, then it's going to be given. And we should also hopefully be able to tell that the shared line is congruent because they're sharing it. So now I need to put this in a statement in a reason format. Let me see if I could just zoom out so you could see the image with it. Okay, draw your T-chart. You're going to have your statements and your reasons. What's my number one? What's my first statement and reason?
PR by 6 QPS. State the reason is given.
Perfect. So I'm going to state what's given first. So PR bisects angle QPS, and PQ is congruent to PS. And my reasoning was given. All right, that's all the information that they gave us. Looking at this image, next, what can I see? I kind of already drew it, but that would be my next step. What am I able to identify here? Can I identify anything else? So I always tell you guys, look at the image. Is there anything else that I can tell is congruent here? Anybody? What else can you tell is congruent here?
PR.
Good. So we're going to go to step 2. PR is congruent to PR. And how do I know that? They share a line, but what is that called?
Definition of bisector?
No, not definition of bisector.
Trend.
Good. Reflexive. Reflexive. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and draw it on there. Now I can go into something else. Whenever you see the word bisects in a proof, you will have some sort of reasoning that says definition of bisector. So just looking at this, I was able to go to step 2 because I knew that they share a line. That's reflexive. Now I'm going to go to step 3. And I'm going to use, because I see the word bisector, I know I'm going to have some sort of definition of angle bisector. And who could tell me what would be my statement for that? What would be the definition of angle bisector? What angles would be congruent? That's what I'm stating. Which two angles would be congruent? Okay, I have angle QPR is congruent to angle, okay, if I'm starting at Q, I'm going to have to start at S. So it's going to be SPR. All right, I labeled everything. So looking at it, I have, here's PQ is congruent to PS. And then I have my reflexive right here, my blue lines. And then I just proved that these two angles are going to be congruent. So I color-coded it for you. Looking at this, now I've labeled everything. I can prove that they're congruent using which theorem? What theorem? We just took a quiz on these. Which theorem am I going to use to prove that these are congruent? Good. Side angle side. So step 4, I'm going to put triangle QPR is congruent to triangle SPR by SAS. And because I proved that this is a congruent triangle, then I can go into my final answer. That angle, not angle 8, angle Q is congruent to angle S by CPCTC. Congruent parts of corresponding triangles are, oh my gosh, I'm so lost right now. It's corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. A lot of words in there. But because I proved that this is a congruent triangle, that means my angles are also going to be congruent. Okay, so I proved it's a congruent triangle by stating SAS. And then with that being said, I know that these two angles will also be congruent. So it's really just taking it step by step. Okay, so you really have to try and follow these. Do we kind of understand at least up to 4? So we wrote what's given, we labeled what was reflexive, we labeled definition of bisector because we know our angles are congruent. Then I told you which congruency statement I'm using. And because my triangles are congruent, that means my angles will also be congruent. So definitely study it and understand it. Do we have any questions on this one?
No.
Okay, let's go ahead and go to number 2. All right, looking at this one, it looks very similar to the first one. But they're giving us additional information. So looking at this, again, I'm going to have my statements and my reasons. So I'm just going to go ahead and draw my little T-chart. I have my statements. I have my reasons. This is not going to be the same as the last one. It looks very, very similar, but you're going to have something different in here. So I'm going to have you guys try and do this one, but I'm going to do the first one with you, and the first section is going to be my given. So statement 1 is PR bisects angle QPS and angle QRS. And how do I know that? That's my given. All right, go ahead and using the information, go ahead and try to write down what you are able to see and what you are able to find in the proof, and then we'll try and figure it out. All right, looking at this example, you could have written it in a different order for the 2 that I'm going to write, but you should have been able to see these. Looking at your papers, a lot of you guys did reflexive first, which is perfect. That's fine. So we should know that the shared side is going to be reflexive. So my shared side, I'm going to represent it here, okay, with my purple line. And looking at it, that is PR is congruent to PR. This is an R. And that is reflexive. If you did not put reflexive, please change it to reflexive. All right, the next one. Because they're giving me bisects, I know I'm going to have something in there that's definition of bisector. So, because I labeled my center, let me actually change that color. So, because I labeled my center, I need to find something else. And they're telling me that it bisects QPS and QRS. So now looking at it, I'm going to have 2 things that the definition of angle bisector is going to be used. I'm going to have angle QPR angle QPR is congruent to angle SPR. And I'm also going to have angle QRP is congruent to angle SRP. And both of these are definition of angle bisector. All right, I labeled everything. I have all my information written down. Now I'm going to go to 4. Triangle PQR is congruent to triangle PSR by what? How do I know they're congruent? Which congruency statement am I using? Good. Angle, side, angle, but I'm not done. They're asking me to prove side RQ is congruent to side RS. And because I know both triangles are congruent and they're specifically asking me for RQ and RS, I'm going to write it as corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. CPCTC. Okay, so are we kind of getting the hang of how to do this? All right, please make sure you know how to do this because you will get a proof on your test on Monday.
I thought it was Tuesday.
No, Monday. Your tests are Mondays and Wednesdays, and this one happens to fall on a Monday.
Is there a next lesson already?
This is the last lesson for chapter 5.
He's about to know.
All right, look at example 3. You guys are doing this on your own. Once you finish it, then you may go if you have to, but you are working on it by yourself. You need at least 4 statements and 4 reasons, and I'm going to check it. So go ahead and get started. All right, hold on. Go ahead. So first thing you should have drawn is your T-chart. If you did not draw that, that should have been the first thing you do. You have your statements and your reasons, Gabe. Go ahead and tell me what my first one is.
The first statement is WX is congruent to YZ, and ZW is congruent to XY. And the reason for that is given.
All right, did they draw it for me already? Did they draw it on my diagram?
No, it didn't.
No, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. WX, YZ, and then I have ZW and YX. Good. What's my next one?
It's going to be ZX is congruent to ZX, and that's because it flex.
Perfect.
Job, Gabe.
Oh, okay.
And then I'm going to represent that on here. All right, what is my next one?
It's going to be angle 2 is congruent to angle 1.
There's one thing before that.
The bisector, right?
There's no bisector because it didn't give me any bisector. You could only use definition of bisector if they're telling you something is bisecting. Is there anything here that says bisecting? So then definition of bisector should never be in there. I am missing one thing before I do what Gabe was talking about. What am I missing? Kyle, you think you know what it is?
Is it like angle 3 is congruent to angle 4?
Not yet. I have to prove that these triangles are congruent before I go into my last one. So how would I prove that these triangles are congruent?
Side by side.
But good, I'm going to prove they're congruent by side, side, side. So I need to state that the triangles, so whatever order you want to write it in, triangle XWZ is congruent to triangle ZYX by side, side, side. Now, Gabe, what was the last step? Now I can state that angle 1 is congruent to angle 2, and how do I know that?
Alternate interior.
Not alternate interior. CPCTC. Okay, so what you guys need to understand is once you get here, which I feel like we all know how to get here by now, okay, we should all know how to show our congruency theorems. Once you get here and you've labeled those 3 things that show you it's congruent, you need to state which congruency theorem you used. Because once I state that congruency theorem, once I state this, that means everything here is congruent. And because everything's congruent, then I know that my angles will also be congruent, okay? Using CPCTC. So you need to understand how you're getting from step 3 to step 4. You need to state the congruency theorem before you can give me the CP/CTC. Another thing that a lot of you guys are getting mixed up, when you're dealing with alternate and interior, exterior corresponding and all of those stuff, alternate interior, alternate exterior, and consecutive angles, you have to work with parallel lines. Are there anything here that shows me they're parallel?
No.
No, so I can't say any of those. The only time I can say that is if I have parallel lines. Okay, so I can't say angle 3 and angle 4 are congruent. I can't say angle 1 and 2 are congruent because of alternate interior. I can't do that because my lines are not parallel. So that's another hint on what you can and cannot use. Do we have any questions on the proofs? All right, you guys do have homework on big ideas. It is proofs. For your homework, to show work, you need to write the proof out. Don't take a picture of it and attach it. I need you to write it out. And you guys are having a test on Monday. So please, please, please make sure you are studying for it. That is the 22nd of January. So please make sure you guys are studying for that. Any questions?
Nope.
Yes.
Is the test only on this lesson?
The test is on 5.5, 5.6, and 5.7. So you will have proofs on this test. Any more questions?